right, guys, we're going to get to our third and final guest of our show. Now, this babe has been supporting our show from day one, and we couldn't be more thankful for that. And I couldn't be more thankful today that she volunteered to share our story. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our third guest, Jo. Hey, girl, how's it going?
Good. How about you?
I am so good. I'm so glad that we've connected on social media together, and now we finally get to talk as in real life as we can. So, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. And I just want to just give you a quick shout out for thank you, ladies, for creating this open space. Just your podcast in general for letting women get to hear other female stories, just to remind them that they're not alone in their struggles.
Oh, thank you so much. And honestly, we were so nervous at first. So having you guys like right out the gate be like, no, this is great. Keep talking, keep doing this. We are just like, okay, this is being well received. So like we have to thank our initial like hype girls from the beginning, because if you guys didn't like that fire under our butts, and like calm some of our anxieties, I'm not sure we'd be so vulnerable. So thank you for that. And thanks back to you guys, especially today, because I know that you also have stories and a voice. And the minute you found something that resonated with you, I'm really proud of you for sharing that story. So before we get to your story though today, can you tell the babes of this community a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Jo. I live in northern BC. I am an independent parent to a 10-year-old daughter who is my life. And we are adventurers. We love to adventure in the bush and camp and kayak and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we really enjoy life, and we're kind of, I always joke that we're kind of like the Gilmore Girls. My daughter's the responsible one, and I'm kind of the free spirited, go with the flow kind of one. So yeah,
That's
that's who we
awesome.
are.
I love that. And then you two are just like a powerhouse together. And I bet that you being all those things and doing all those things just molds her to be that fun outdoorsy person that just, nature's so important. And it's so great when kids really get to experience it. And I just love when parents really teach kids how to enjoy the outdoors, because it's, for the most part, it's cost effective and it's beautiful and it's restoring and it's, I don't
Absolutely.
I guess it's because
Absolutely.
moving back to BC, I'm like, I just love nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
I
And
love it.
to be honest, I always felt that because of my journey to become a mom, that my relationship with her was going to be different. That, when you want something so bad and you pray for it and you try for it for so long, I always knew we were going to be really close, and I really looked forward to the adventures and the things we were going to do together.
I love that.
So
So that
yeah,
leads us
it's
right into
it's just
our
it's
story.
it just kind of went right with with our hobbies and stuff, and it's just been such a great journey.
That's so awesome. So then for that, then it's obviously, I just, that's how I feel like with me and my mom, we were always doing stuff together. Like we just, no matter what, everything was an adventure. And, whether we were doing crafts or going actual out on the adventure, it's just always fun to have that best friendship. And I really, feel for those that don't have that. Like I don't necessarily have a good relationship with my father, but I have a really good one with my mom, and I treasure that so much because it's just awesome. So I can imagine that feeling with my own one day, or the cat. I just put that all into my cats. That's
Oh,
just
absolutely. I was
right.
going to
So
say, I should mention, I do have a firstborn. He is a dog. He's
yeah,
2 years older than her. They're best friends, and he is with us on all of our adventures as well. My
it's very
journey, of course,
important.
to adopt him is not the topic of the podcast today. However, it's
That's
still
important.
very special, and maybe a different one, a different podcast.
100%. It is very important. Cat and fur babies are very important, and
Absolutely.
they talk back less, so that deserves a whole month, I think, of just
Yeah,
like different types of parenting. And like we've got human ones, and we've got fur ones, and we've got adult friendship ones, and we have all sorts of
absolutely.
different ones. So with that being said, then now you have a beautiful daughter. Can you tell us a little bit? Then I'm just like the other girls, I'm going to let you share your story on where you, however you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, so I know that you guys have done podcasts about yourself, about kind of, the struggles of young childhood and stuff. And I just kind of wanted to start a bit there. Like
Of
we all
course.
know that growing up and it is hard. It's tough. We're all trying to find ourselves, and we're all going through different, things and experiences and stuff. But in my journey, I always knew I was different. I always knew there was something different about me, but I couldn't pinpoint it. I don't know. I always just had this feeling. And then, obviously, the first couple of years of elementary school they are what they are. But then once, grade 6 to grade 8 came along and all the girls were developing and going through puberty and getting periods and stuff, I just wasn't.
Yep.
There was just nothing. Like there was a little bit of like obviously puberty things, but like there was no menstrual cycle. There was nothing. So, my mom took me to the family doctors and stuff. And I was just told I was a late bloomer and things. So we just carried on with life. And again, you move on to high school and again, different challenges, more intense challenges in life.
Yes.
Everyone's going through it as a teenager. You know what it's like.
Hormones everywhere.
Absolutely. So, on that, I just again was not developing. My body wasn't doing the things that the other girls' bodies were doing, and it was, everyone had periods and I didn't, and I just couldn't understand, right? So, obviously, by grade 10, I knew it was a medical thing.
Yeah.
And I started to question it. I knew it wasn't a late bloomer thing. Something in my heart, they would say women's intuition.
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't a late bloomer thing, that it was a medical thing. So again, we started looking into doctor things and stuff. But at this time, you're getting boyfriends and things like that. So the insecurities I felt with my body and my womanhood um, was terrible. Like it was, you're already struggling so much with a developing body and breakups and things in high school, typical things. But then to go through the fact that you don't know your value as a woman because you don't know what you can, if you can produce children, and it in society and stuff, it's held in high regard that you're going to produce children. Men, they're looking for a spouse that's going to give them children, right? and
Yep.
and to be
Totally.
honest, I lived in a one stoplight small town in beautiful British Columbia, northern BC. I'm talking amazing community. I can't say enough about the community. But that, we were young kids in a small town high school. We were getting married and having kids. This was your life plan,
Yep.
right? And I didn't know where I stood in that. And it really devalued me. And it made my journey a lot harder. It made me feel a lot less than other females. So I struggled really badly. And then, of course, I was a bit of a tomboy. I was into like woodworking and building things. And my dad owned a trucking business. So I was kind of into that. And, my self esteem plummeted. I was not the typical teenage girl. And it was really tough.
And in
However,
in that sorry. I
no,
say
go
in that
ahead.
I was say in that time too, I think we're at that age where it was like a lot more gender specific activities related to certain things or dress codes related, where now it's more like, you're just more free to have artistic expression. There was that to the 90s, but there was also like this weird standard where it was like, like hot girl or like, you know what I mean? So I think for me that really tore me down on like, and I agree, I relate, sorry, to that, where you're just like, I don't know if I'm a woman. And then for me, I had no boobs. And then you had to be like this super hot girl, all those
Absolutely.
things. And you're like,
Yes.
holy hell, like, am I a boy? Am I, and
Hmm.
then you're questioning that. So sorry, I just wanted to interject. I'm saying that I told that time too, for those that maybe are a little bit younger, that was really not as freeing time. So I could totally agree where you're just like doing those things, but society's telling you, oh, that's more of a boyish thing when you're already going through that. Like, that's
Absolutely.
that needs to change, and I'm glad it's starting to, but we still have work to do there.
I was going to say, we still have work to do. And I'd also like to throw out there that this was in the 90s,
Yeah,
right? Like I
exactly.
graduated in 99. So this was back when, even worse. And like I said, in a smaller town, like
Yeah.
it's not like all of us were headed off to university and stuff like it is now. Like it was different. Like
And
your
no
life
social media.
plan was to have kids. And stuff. So yeah, and it's funny because you, like I said, your teenage years, they're hard enough, but then to not know how you're going to transition into adulthood when you're really missing that main part of it, which is, can I produce children? Like that's,
Yep.
in as a teenager, we're already going through enough, and now all of a sudden we need to, what are you going to be when you grow up? Where are you going to work? Who are you going to marry? And now, can you even have those kids, right? Like,
Yes.
so it was a lot, and like you mentioned, things aren't talked about as openly as they are now, and
Mhm.
this was not a topic that people openly talked about, so it was very hard to deal with. So yeah, I valued myself very little. I just found as a teenager and young adult that I accepted a lot less than I probably should have. Um, Long story short, I got into an unhealthy relationship in high school, and we were together for quite a long time, and we loved each other quite a bit, but we fought a lot as well. And it was quite a journey, but we loved hard. We fought hard. Like it is what it is.
Like a typical, like I look back and I think too, I don't know if you heard this episode, I can't remember where I said it, but it's like there's so many things in high school that I look back that I, not saying that you were like this, that I raged over, were like so dramatic over, and I think, oh man, my poor high school boyfriend, like some things that were so
Absolutely.
dramatic as a teenager, not saying that it wasn't, but I just think back like, I'm not going to hold too much about this because like,
Yeah.
whoa,
And I think,
whoa.
yeah, I think too, like I said, with my journey, like when you're questioning who you are as a person, I was just like, who's gonna want to marry someone who can't have kids? This person is supporting you in this. So it kind of makes it, overshadows some of the other things, right? So it was what it was. But yeah, I didn't really think that I was worth any better, and I didn't really know where my journey was going to take me. So I just kind of went with it. And we ended up getting married and building a life that from the outside looked perfect. And we started our fertility journey. And it started with years and years and years of testing and poking and prying and feeling like a guinea pig and disappointing news and no accurate results and disappointment after disappointment. And I'm talking tears as a couple, the tears we faced, not knowing where, again, if either of us at this point now, he's on the same ship as me, are we going to be parents, right? And
Yep.
I give him mad respect for that to this day. So I just would like to point that out. But after years of the testing and stuff, I was beat down. Like
Of course.
I didn't even know what was coming of it. Anyway, I
And
was
how do
given,
you prepare? You
how
don't
do
really.
you? Exactly.
Yeah.
And to be
Yeah.
honest, again, we were young adults,
Of
right? We're
course.
from a small town. I remember when we went to Calgary to do our first round of fertility treatment, and the nurses wrote down our age, and they were just like, okay, we've never had a couple in here that isn't in their 30s. By the time couples go to university and pay off their student loans and can afford to do fertility treatment, like they're already in their 30s. Here we are in our young 20s, right?
Yep.
He's a logger, so he's making money. I'm working full time, right? We're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, we're married, we're having kids. Look at us
Yeah.
go, right? So
Totally.
yeah, so
And you
we
knew, right? You knew that that was just what was your next step. So why not necessarily beat around the bush, but that you had a goal in mind and you knew what you needed to do. So you guys went for it. And
yeah, and
especially then at
I
that time, I can imagine like there's not a Facebook support group these days now, right? So
exactly.
that's really brave and amazing of you to just being like, no, fuck it, let's go. But that being said, no one would have been able to prepare you. So I'm glad you're giving yourself grace for like, how the fuck would you have even known that?
Yeah, what a crazy journey. Like I remember we went to a conference in Calgary before we went and did our first fertility treatment. And it was just a bunch of, I hate to use this term, but infertile couples in this
Yep.
conference room in the Calgary hospital. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. I'm sitting with all these sobbing women who are walking the exact same path as me. And like you said, we didn't have kick-ass podcasts like yours who made you feel included, right? Like we were just fighting this battle alone, and fertility issues were kind of shamed, and you know Monica and Chandler weren't open about their fertility yet. It wasn't on
Yes.
TV, right?
Right.
Those things have changed the world. So
They
the
did.
perspective of it is so different. And so what they overall what they found out was that my pituitary gland doesn't function properly. It's like a dormant gland sitting in my head. It was actually misdiagnosed as like a brain tumor or something at one time because it's just like dormant tissue.
Right.
So all of your hormones for your reproductive cycle would start with that gland, and mine doesn't work. So what my treatment was is I would be hooked up to an old 1970s diabetes insulin pump, but they would put GnRH in it, and that would pump into my body for 28 days, a 28-day cycle, which would make me produce eggs. I would then give myself injections to ovulate the eggs, and we would fertilize the eggs. That was the fertility plan. So I didn't have a medical diagnosis at this time for why this was happening. We just had a game plan for how to become pregnant. So off to Calgary, me and my husband go 28 days together alone in a motor home. Without him going to work. I'm not surprised I didn't end up pregnant. I'm going to be honest. It was hell. Okay. Like,
Yeah, that's fair.
also, you have to think I had never lived with these hormones before. So I was going
Yeah.
through, yeah.
You
Anyway,
don't even know
it
how to
was,
handle.
no,
Like,
no,
you're like,
it
I
was
can't even tell you what's wrong because I don't know.
exactly, exactly. Also, I'm sure this was hormone induced, but I had a dream while we were doing this that it would take 3 rounds for me to get pregnant, and that something major would happen between round 2 and round 3 that would make me understand why I had to do this journey, why I had to go through this heartbreak. So anyway, we came home,
Interesting.
and weeks went on, and sadly we had negative test results. I ended up having a cycle, and we ended up not being pregnant. And of course, we were heartbroken.
Of course.
But I'm going to be honest, at that time, we still had money left to go do more. So I was hopeful, right? Like I still had that hope in my heart. And I started planning round 2, called the clinic. We got this all lined up. Flights are booked. I've booked time off with work. We've got this. So yeah, very, very, my heart was broken, but I was hopeful. I was ready. So round 2 happens. I fly to Calgary with my best friend this time because my husband's not actually needed for the first 28 days, right? So
Yeah. Fair.
no offense to him. We know
Yeah.
his role in this.
Yeah.
And
And your
So
best.
yeah, so me and my bestie, we fly to Calgary and we spend some time there. We shop and stuff. Again, we're from a small town, right? So we spent a week or two shopping and going for dinners and adventuring and stuff like that.
Girl Scouts.
Yeah, I was totally hopeful, and so it was a great time. He came and she left, and we finished the end of the treatment and we came back, and again I was very hopeful and stuff, and our journey led us to an unsuccessful path again. And this time I was broke. We didn't have the money to go again, and it was a totally different journey. um, I was devastated. I plummeted into a depression that I can't do. I wasn't even a functional human being. And somehow in that journey, it brought me to the medical side of like, why is this happening to you? Yeah, I get it. They have a band-aid to fix it, but like, why is this happening? So I started digging into it, and we continued to work hard and save money in hopes that this would happen. But there was a very long leg between round 2 and round 3. Um, and in that, I was ended up being diagnosed with the syndrome that I have, and which is the thing with the pituitary gland. It was actually really cool. A specialist was flown into the local hospital outside of town because I lived in a small town, so there wasn't a hospital there. And I went to go see him, and he was asking me a bunch of questions and going over the test results of all my hormones and stuff. And he asked me if I could smell.
What?
And I said, no, I can't. And his eyes lit up like a light bulb lit on top of his head. And he wrote something down on a yellow sticky note and passed it to me. and said, this is what you have. He gave me a quick explanation and told me that I could Google it. You have to think, of course, this is again in the early 2000s. So
Yep.
everybody was on the Google, and
Yep.
the,
That was a doctor then.
yeah. And he honestly, we were all waiting for this specialist to come to this small town. So people on to the next person. And that's how I was diagnosed. And so you can only imagine that once we saved the money to go back to do our third round, my heart was so full of hope. I was like, okay, well, that was the point. I had the dream.
Oh,
I've been diagnosed because, to be honest, I thought the only health issue involved with my syndrome was the infertility, but it wasn't. And I needed other treatment to prevent ongoing issues because of that. So that was the big news. That was the big thing I needed. Right. So
yeah.
if I would have just got pregnant, I maybe would have not jumped into that medical side of it to actually get my diagnosis to treat the other medical side of what my syndrome causes. So, again, off to third round, I went off to Calgary, heart full of hope. Here I go. I went by myself and stayed with my cousin. She let me stay with her. Super cheap. Thank you, cousin. And he came there, and we ended up doing an IUI this time. So I produced eggs, we ovulated the eggs, and then not only did we just have fun to try fertilize, but we did an IUI, so an intrauteral insemination. So they took some of the best sperm and inseminated it at the top of my uterus, so it didn't have to swim as far to get to the eggs.
Nice.
Just try just up the
Yeah,
odds.
of course.
Anyway, we went home, and 2 weeks later, I'm at my friend's son's birthday party, and it's a fire outside, and her sister-in-law is talking about how her grandpa passed away, and I am sobbing. Okay, like sobbing over this grandpa passing away. And all of a sudden, my stomach dropped, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. I'm a mess. Right. I knew in my heart, and I couldn't tell them, but I knew from that moment on. And yeah, of course, a week and a half later, I had a positive pregnancy test.
Oh.
And I was just like, holy, this was all of it was worth it. Right. Like I just knew that this was my journey. I knew that it wasn't over yet. I can be honest when I say that the reason that I had fertility can be hereditary. And I was warned that I could pass it on to a child. So the effects of this syndrome that I have is a lot worse for boys than it is for girls. So when I found out I was pregnant, from that point on, I just prayed for a girl, because I was like, if she ends up with it, please, like it's a lot less.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a shout out to all my common syndrome homeboys out there. I know you guys are struggling with your diagnosis as much as I did. And keep fighting that battle, because like I said, I think for women we can hide it a lot better, and I can't imagine what it's like to go through life with that. So
of course.
shout out to them if they're hearing this. But okay, whoa, no more tears. Back to the joy. I was pregnant.
You were
I was pregnant. I was so excited, right? Like I came home, and the excitement of it all, the 9 months went by so fast, just so much excitement. It was crazy how, like, what a wild ride that was. Not only that, but at the time my husband was in camp, so it was kind of a bit of freedom. It was kind of nice, right? He was away, and me and my dog just hung out, and yeah, that was great. So it was
you got to enjoy it.
Yeah, it was a nice pregnancy. I felt really good about my body. Like I was like, look at you go, like you did it. I had a new love for my body, because at that time I'm like, you shame your body, like why can't you do it? Why aren't you able to do this? Right. So yeah, I had a love for my body. I was totally taking care of myself. It was great. I felt wonderful. I had my daughter. It was awesome. And then parenthood started. We attempted to raise her together, but like the negativity of our relationship was ruining it. I wasn't able to be the mom that she deserved. I couldn't be the mom I deserved to be after what I had went through. And to be quite honest, I think the same goes for him. I don't think he could be the dad he wanted to be, because we weren't happy. And
you guys went through a lot.
And I'm sure you can imagine, like, with any relationship that isn't very healthy, navigating anything is a struggle. So imagine
Totally.
navigating parenting with someone that you're on a completely different pages.
Oh
Like,
yeah, no, I can imagine.
it
I
was
honestly would
horrible.
be in the same, I think I'd be in the same place as you, like, had we conceived, like, had we been able to, not that I think, it was bad, but we were just very different futures and where we would want to have like guided our children. So that was like, for me, a red flag after us being together for so long. We were growing into different people, and it was like, okay, that's going to be like a very difficult thing to navigate if we do, after all this time of struggling, end up having one, because like, it's like once you get it, you're just like, this is my treasure. And it's like very hard on top of all the emotional trauma you've had to go through now to go on, like, not have time to heal, now just be in a fight or flight mode again through parenting. And that's emotionally exhausting. And it's understandable if, after all that, you guys were there for each other through it all. You got your beautiful gift, you got your daughter, and then it's okay now that you guys get to carry on and enjoy the rest of your lives, even if it's not cohabitating together, but as co-parenting.
Absolutely. And like, honestly, having my daughter, like, she changed my view of self-worth,
Yeah.
because I
Good.
felt like my infertility and my diagnosis and stuff devalued me. But then when I looked at her face, not knowing if she had the same disease, shouldn't call it a disease, but no, when
Yeah.
she had the
No, for
same
sure.
the same illness, if that, she was still so valued by me. So I almost shed that layer of thinking I wasn't as worthy. It almost brought me to this point of pride,
Of course.
right? And then I also had this, like, lack of a better word, cockiness, because I had achieved this, like, hell yeah, I freaking grew a baby and birthed her,
Yeah.
kept her alive for 6 months just off breast milk. Look at me
Yeah.
go. Like, I can do anything. Like, it totally changed the way I viewed myself and the way I viewed women in general. Right.
Yeah.
And
Of
I say this a million and one times and again about your podcast and everyone who's open about their journeys. So much of my journey changed by listening to other women talk about what they had went through.
course.
We even had couples sit down with us and talk about adoption journeys, even though that wasn't our path, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
You can take stuff away from it, even if it's not your exact experience, because none of us are going to necessarily go through the same experiences. There's going to be a lot of similarities to a lot of stories, but it just, to me, it means, like you said, by sharing, maybe we can find the relatability of each other's experiences to help not feel so alone, even though like ours don't relate, but I'm still super like inspired and motivated and just like have so much pride beaming for you and your story, even though mine is completely different. I don't know. It's nice to be in that space where you're just so proud of fellow women
Yeah,
that are sharing their story and just being aware.
absolutely. Absolutely. And to be honest, like, obviously my journey ended up with me raising my daughter primarily on my own. Sorry, I shouldn't say primarily with him, but in separate homes. He's has another family and stuff now. I didn't want more children, and I think that was only fair too, to let him do that if that was something he wanted to do. I wanted to be the best version of myself. That meant that separation and divorce was what was best for us. But like,
Yep.
I do think that that's a journey in itself. And having that camaraderie and sisterhood of the infertility created a foundation for me and my, it takes a village independent parenting. Like,
Oh,
I've
totally.
always known, like, I'm like, oh, look at all these women out there that I know that I can count on, because when I went through this difficult time, I could count on these women. Like, I had mentioned about the IUI. I didn't know about what an IUI was. My doctor didn't mention this. It was at a different clinic. So I went from one clinic to another during my treatment until I was out camping with a family friend who mentioned she had it. If she wasn't
Exactly.
open with me about that journey, that could have changed my entire story, right? Like, it's
Absolutely.
that
Universal
openness.
connection.
Oh, yes. And like the openness and stuff. And that's why it's so cool to be able to be your guest today, because like I said,
Yeah.
to know that everybody can tell their story and lean on each other, and know that even though your story's so different, and this lady had a completely different fertility issue than me and all the rest of it, that one conversation over beers around a campfire might have changed the outcome of my journey, right? And I just think so, offer your support, like do what you can to help others out, and know that you're not alone. You know that
Absolutely.
the other moms at the school or the soccer or whatever, they could have faced the same thing. Like, talk about how you feel, be a support to others.
Yeah, and I think that's like the craziest thing is like we always think nobody wants to hear our story or no one wants to hear that heavy, and no, you don't want to put that on somebody else. And I totally agree because I've done that too, or we diminish what we've been through or the trauma because someone's been through something worse. But you don't know if, let's say, for example, for me, I wasn't trying and I wasn't expecting it, so when it happened it just kind of caught me off guard because I already knew, not already like sad, I already kind of knew that there was a really good chance that we wouldn't, and we weren't trying, and I was on birth control, so it was such a shock, and so I just like made it so tiny. But it was really hard to go through for the first like 3 or 4 months for sure. And I was like, well, that's silly, you should share it because maybe someone else had something small like that and they've diminished it, but yet it just keeps hurting their heart in ways that they're not, sure about. And sure enough, as soon as I shared it, there's messages being like, thank you, and it's just, it's wonderful to be in a space where you're ready to talk about your story, because no matter what, the ripple effect is, it is going to heal you in a sense, and I don't know, validate your story more, and then it's going to help other people feel less alone. And I think that's what we all need, is just that big hype girl that it's like, I'm sorry that you're going through this, let's not discredit what you went through, but we're going to get through it together, and how can I support you? And that's all you need.
Exactly. Exactly. And you can tell from our conversation, like I got really emotional about the diagnosis part. And I
Of
think a
course.
lot of people are at that part in their journey. You know, I'm past the age of having kids and stuff, and I'm past my diagnosis, and it's part of my life. But a lot of people are just getting that news. And that's a huge transition for people. And know that if that's you, that you can talk to people. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't hold that in over shame, because that will drown you.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that talking about it, how healing that was going to be. Not only that I was going to, help other people heal, but how healing it would be for myself too. Like how much better of a human I could be when I let go of that and, just was free to be myself.
Yeah, and I don't know where it developed where we weren't allowed to be honest or find a community to grow and heal together. Like we know that it takes, like you said, it takes a community to, you might have raised your daughter, like you said, alone, but you've got, like you said, you need a community of people to support you and to run to. Like, Kayla will call me when stuff's happening with her son. I might not be a parent, but I'm, sometimes like a voice of reason. You just need those people to, I don't know. I always kind of feel like your brain is sometimes muddy, and then your friends are like your windshield wipers, and they just kind of like help clear the mud, help you
Ooh,
see a
I
little bit
love
clearer.
that.
Right. So
Yes.
I'm always like, I'm just your windshield wiper. I'm just helping you clear off. You already know. You guys know. Most people know this information inside. They know deep down. They just need someone to validate, hear them, and just
Yeah.
say, I'm sorry you're going through that. Like, and I think that's for me when my anxiety spikes, and people are like, oh, don't worry about it. Calm down. And you're like, no, don't, and like, don't devalue what I'm saying. Say, I'm sorry that you're going through this. I can see that that's hard. How can I be here for you? And I'll tell you. Right. And I think that's like the biggest change in conversation now is, how can I support you? We don't know. Let's
Yeah,
ask.
absolutely. And I want to throw out there too that, infertility, it has a lot to do with men as well. Not
Yes.
only when they are the one that's facing the medical thing, but when their partner is. And I think that we need to support men in
Yes.
discussing this, and discussing it with their buddies. There's nothing wrong with talking about this over beer. There's nothing wrong. Like, this is a regular everyday life topic. These are struggles that lots of couples are facing. So, allowing, um, you know, an open platform for them to be able to speak up as well is, I think,
Of course.
equally as important.
Yes, and that is the one thing that gets discredited a lot, and I can imagine because I have, we've watched our friends, like, we have to talk, we do have to talk, and of course it's a little bit harder because we have more of a female grouping, but we know men that have, we've had to go through the infertility part as well. We've watched them go through the child loss as well.
Mm-hmm.
We've watched them go through, I even have had friends in the past that weren't for, let's say, an abortion for their spouse, and they really took that hard. There is a huge gap in a space for men to talk about that as well. So, obviously we're always open to have them on the show, always. But as females, like, also maybe let's do good and checking in our guy friends too, that we know are
Yeah.
going through that, and making sure they're okay too. If they don't want to talk about it, that's fine. Just
And
like, hey, we're
a-
here if you need us.
as the spouse who had the fertility issue, I supported my partner as hard as it was for him to be able to discuss this with his friends.
Of course.
Obviously, I didn't want him talking about my private parts, with his
No.
buddies over beer at the shop. But I wanted him to be able to feel that he was safe to be able to be like, this is what I'm struggling with or whatever.
Of course.
I'm sure it probably didn't come out as that because, again, this journey is just absolutely a horrible thing to have to face. But
Of
it
course.
really is that. And I want women who are going through this to understand it's okay to support the men too, and that it's okay. It's not, we don't need to be ashamed of it. It's okay for them to tell their butts that they're struggling with it, because again, they might find a support system that's really going to help them because they're
And it
struggling as
doesn't,
well.
yeah, and it doesn't devalue, I think too, and you'll say this too, the women are going through this, especially young as teenagers, like, what our biggest takeaways is, like, for me too, because I was super, like, underdeveloped. I got my period in the right times. It was hell on earth. But I didn't grow any boobs, or, like, and
Yep.
that was a big thing. And just, I'm glad that more things are being talked to of what women's worths are, just than how our bodies are growing or how we're being affected by our reproductive organs, because we're far more than those things. And I think me and you both realized that the long, hard journey. And that's why another reason we want to share that for others, just being like, your anxiety and your depression is going to tell you that, but it's not you. And like you said, you needed that moment to medically address what was going on. And had you not, maybe those medical things would have never been addressed. And then something could have been detrimental down the road. And not saying
Absolutely.
that that excuses what you went through, but the fact that you've related to that and understood that where you are today and being eternally happy, you needed all the good and the bad of the past and all the dark and the light experiences to get you where you are today, to be that empathetic woman, to be that one with a voice for those that can't, that are standing up and saying, on our show, like, it's okay. Like, all of those reasons led you to today, all those things. And I just, once you have that universal connection and that feeling, and you can see all those dots align, you can't see going forward, but you can see it back. I don't know if you feel that, but I always feel like that's such like a, I'm just always so grateful for that feeling, being like, this is why. Okay.
Yeah, when your struggles have purpose,
Yeah.
right? There's a piece about that. I agree. And when you can just trust in that, there's just it's so much easier to deal with. And yeah, I look back now and I wouldn't choose it any different way. I can tell you right now that the way that I deal with my ex, a lot of it is based on the fact that I have mad ass respect for him, that he stood by my side during infertility. Like,
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
I think that, we were destined to never be together. I'm going to be honest. I'm not trying to be hurtful, but we
No.
were not destined to be together. And I think that in order for me to not go to a place of anger or hatred towards him, I would always hold that peace in my heart of the fact that he said, I no matter what happens between us, that man supported me in my infertility and was part of the reason why I am lucky enough to be a parent, right? So I
Yes.
think that's part of the journey as well. So
Yeah.
I do not look at it as a negative thing. And
No.
again, we can see it on TV and sitcoms and everything, that it's openly discussed now, and that us as women, we have the platform to do that. So don't struggle in silence, ladies. Like, feel comfortable to talk about it.
Yep. And you don't have to. And like we already said, you don't have to shout it out to the world if you're not ready yet. That's I wasn't. Well, I would have been ready to talk about this years ago. Now I am. Like, there's people around you, your best friend, your family member, whoever you feel like you trust the most, at least one person. Just don't sit in those thoughts, because we'll say once you sit in those thoughts alone, it gets very dark and it's hard to get out of sometimes, especially when you've been dealing with it as since early as teenagers and you're going through this whole struggle. So we can't ever stop what's going to happen to us. And anxiety will try to tell you that you can control it, but you can't.
But you can't. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so what you can do is get yourself a community of people that are going to be like, I'm so sorry, I love you, I'm here, whatever I can do. I'm sorry I don't have the answers. I don't think anybody ever expects anyone to have the answers, except for I'm just here to support you in whatever way. And I think that is great as a friend, as a family member, as a spouse, as even in this community, online social media friends, even, just we're here, and let's stop sitting in our shame and let's start sharing experiences so everyone's uniqueness can actually be more relatable than we actually. And I don't want to discredit, people are unique, but we're also very similar, and we can help each
Absolutely.
other on our struggles and our weaknesses while, you know, helping others with our strengths.
Yeah, and I also want to mention too, I think it's really important that we raise our kids, especially our daughters, their values not based on their reproduction.
Yes.
It's not the 40s or 50s or 60s anymore. Like it's okay not to have kids, and it's
Mhm.
okay not to be able to have kids, whether you're male or female. And I think that it's, so important to just raise our kids feeling that giving them reasons to feel worthy, that is not based around fertility, because we don't know their journey, and we want them to be able to find worth in themselves, whether they can reproduce or not, or whether
Absolutely. And
or whether they want to reproduce or not. Because I
absolutely.
also am on the other side of the fence. As much as I wanted to reproduce and did it, once I had my daughter, I knew I was not into doing it again. Like I was pretty sure that was it for me, right? Like it was
Oh,
not
trip
something. So I
trip to
think,
Walmart.
yeah, I think women know, like I want girls to know that they have the right to choose not to have kids, or it's okay. That's not, your worth isn't based around your fertility, or
And yeah,
or the use of that fertility, right? Like it's
chasing
that's
happiness.
yep, absolutely. Do what you want, have fun, enjoy life, live it up.
And talk about it and be there, and that's what I love. Like, I love now that, times are changing, women are working more, like there's so many diverse questions, that those small talk questions, although they're still there, they're more diverse, right? So it's changing the conversation of like, oh, after school you're going to get married and have kids, and we're being like, oh, what are you going to school for, and focusing on the things that that those people are super passionate about. If you go to most people's social medias now, which were a thing before, you can kind of pick up what they're really into. And I like that people are like, oh, what are you doing for a career now? Just like, oh, when are you going to get married and have kids? Or you've had one kid,
Exactly.
when you're going to have your second. How about just being like, oh, how's your one kid that you do have? Like, why put that? And then, like, you probably understand that stress as well. Like, oh, are you going to have another one? Just like, I'm glad that they're not part of the conversations as more, but that we're open to talk about it if we need to.
I always call it the Christmas card life. That's life
Yeah.
isn't about that. It's not about the, oh, Joe got married and had 3 kids and works at this place. That's not what it is anymore. Like you
No.
get to do what you want. We're not trying to fit into this Christmas card letter,
Cookie cutter.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
not, that's not what we're doing anymore. Like you get
No.
to do whatever you want if you're, yeah, and that's, yeah, I think that's great.
And
So
I love so much. I appreciate your story so much. And I'm so glad that we've connected over social media and then today over this. Although, like I said, I wasn't going to baby you. I'm sorry for all the pain that you went through. But I'm so glad that you have everything that you hope for, and that you've turned I read this quote the other day, and I don't know who it's by, so I'm sorry, but I did not say this, but it was like, I love when people take their wounds into wisdom. And then even further
oh,
to that, they share that wisdom because they don't want other people to feel alone. So it's like always showing up and being that person that you wish you had. So thank you for doing that, because by you showing up with your story today, that's going to help someone. It helped me. Another reason why I like the podcast, because you can't see me, I can be quiet when you guys are talking and silently like tear it out and jump back in, and you guys don't know. So I want to thank you again so much for coming on the show today. I hope you had a great time. I hope you feel that you got to share. I'm think you're going to help tons of people. So thank you again so much, Joe, for coming on the show. Is there any final words you want to give before I sign off on the show today?
no, I just want to again thank you. And I know I didn't get to meet Kayla, but I thank you and I appreciate what you guys are doing here. And thank you for having me today.
Of course. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you supporting us from day one. And like I said, this won't be welcome to the new addiction of podcasting. It won't be our last show. We've had people now. Today is going to be, I think we had our yesterday had our third guest, third showing.
Awesome.
Because it does, you'll start to to see the ripple effect of sharing your story. So again, thanks, Joe. And you guys, that wraps it up for our episode 15, our guest show on miscarriages and infertility. And we just want to thank you guys always for showing up and listening to our babes and supporting them. Always know that they're here to listen. We're here to listen. And our next episode we're going to get into is all about labor and delivery, which this girl knows nothing about. I don't know. I think I might put my earmuffs on the whole entire time, just in the off chance that the stork doesn't deliver my baby like I've been hoping for the last 34 years. But again, thanks for showing up on the show, guys. We love you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye. Thank you guys so much for stopping by today. We appreciate you so much. If you like this episode and you want to hear more or be updated with episode drops, please make sure to send us some love on our Instagram page, the Be Real Babe Podcast. Give us a follow and stay tuned for more realness coming to you next week. Until next time, babes.